And we should be live. Let me make sure that everything is all right on my end. Because there is that slight little bit of a lag right there. Do, 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 do. So, yes, the topic of the day being rebalance timing luck. So, what is the spirit of what I'm trying to get at? That would be that I've come across a lot of people asking the questions of portfolio management. And while I am just like most sensible people, very, very hesitant to give any sort of financial advice, I can at least give at least or share some interesting thoughts and observations that I've seen over the years. So, again, no right answers necessarily, and no hopefully wrong answers, but without any without any more delay, here we go. So, what the heck is rebalance timing luck? I am blatantly plagiarizing from the great Corey Hofstein. Their Twitter or X is at C Hofstein, as we can see right here. Feel free to give him a follow. I really enjoyed his work with Jason C. Buck at Jason C. Buck. And back in the day, they used to have a channel called Pirates of Finance or at Finance Pirates. Sadly, the podcast or YouTube channel that they did has become defunct, and they're at least at this time that I'm aware of aren't doing anymore. But I like to try and credit people as I see it the best I can. The Corey and the Pirates of Finance were the ones that brought me to this concept that I thought was interesting. Uh, and high decks. I don't know if that necessarily showed cleanly because slight lag. Okay, cool. It showed. So yes, high decks. And hello everyone. Hope you all like and subscribe to this content. But yeah, so what the heck is rebalance timing luck, and where did we specifically observe it? Well, the fine people at papers.ssrn.com, being a bit of a boomer here on my end. Basically, academic papers can be published here, and this can be a source of inspiration or perspective way to do some research on things. And the topic of portfolio management or when and how to rebalance is one that we got to see over a period of time. So, fundamental indexation was a paper, originally done in early 2000s. Paper has since been revised, had a few revisions, and it was originally done by a, uh, an impressive fund manager named Rob Arnott. The reason why I chuckled is because I am aware, not everybody is, that when it comes to finance beef or beef within the finance world, uh, Rob, Rob Arnott and Cliff Asness, the two of them have have had quite a few moments of sparring and jousting over Twitter. So yes, like internet beef can extend to all the fun places. So, but that is not what we're here for. We are here for the topic of fundamental indexation. Hello, Moxie. Thank you for showing up. Um, so yes, what the heck was fundamental indexation? So this paper, by and large, it kind of is sort of like a precursor or prelude, if you would, to what would ultimately become like the prospectus and the fund that is FTSE RAFI, which perfectly fine product. Everyone can nitpick it. I'm not going to do that for you. You can do it on your own. But basic, like my crude attempt at explaining it is, it's kind of like passive with a tilt. Like, if you've heard of a value tilt, it conceptually kind of is the same, just with slightly different parameters. And we can use this as an example because, like while the first draft was done back in 2023, published '04, and has had revisions since, the fine people over here, and I am way off. Again, same source. Actually, if we go back, Fundamental Indexation, Rebalancing Assumptions and Performance by David Blitz. et al. From Robeco Quantitative Investments. They did their own paper, and geez, that is really small. Let us bigify that and recenter. They did their own paper, and what they did and what they noticed was that Mr. Arnott and his crew over at with and collaborating with FTSE, they that original paper way back when, if I remember correctly, they did their rebalance some arbitrary date. I want to say it was like end of year December. But when they launched the fund, the rebalance was actually done in March. Now it's a small little thing to observe, and what the spirit and core of the paper gets at is if you look at the rebalance and compare it to any other arbitrary month of rebalance, you can get a vast disparity of outcomes with the same strategy. Which again, it's effectively passive with a little bit of a tilt. So that's a little bit of an interesting point here. Now, how much of the dispersion is there? Well, if we scroll down some to where we get at, uh, as much as a 10% outperformance, but if you say rebounds in September here, you actually ended up being negative. Quite a big dispersion. The rebounds in March that they had, whereas if you rebounds in December as originally intended, you didn't get anywhere near the performance of just shy of 6% of a gain. Whereas with what FTSE Rafi did end up going with, you got just a little over 10%. So rebalancing or managing a portfolio, quite an interesting thing that people, I argue, should consider. And regardless of what you think of me or what you think of this topic, it's funny because FTSE Rafi, October 12th, they this paper came out, you know, 2010, and what do? They take a look at this, and what do they reference? Rebound timing sensitivity pretty early. They ended up doing what was called like a staggered approach, uh, and yeah. So like what I'm getting at is there's some really big observations that I take away from this, uh, and that would be that like Google here for whatever reason is just like grumpy with any sort of chart performance on this, but like the funny thing is that even what should be a passive fund can change and can change dramatically. And the performance of FTSE Rafi, like any sort of fund that originally was structured with the old method of rebounds to the updated method, if we look at what was then to now, or like right around that cutoff date, you still have that same performance back then as you do now. So what I'm getting at is I recognize that some people, not everybody necessarily cares about fundamentals of a company, be it digging through a 10K or looking at financial statements. But maybe you're more of a quantitative person that has your specific metrics or indicators. Maybe you're more of a technical analysis trader of some sort. Now, I don't know if you would necessarily care about a max chart going back years or decades, but uh, it's funny though because what I'm getting at is people care about back tests sometimes, and the very definition or nature or structure of the tools that we use may be radically different from what they were then, and how you adjust maybe should be at least carefully considered and taken into consideration going forward. Hello, Lincoln. Good seeing you. And yes, Lincoln, actually, you bring up a very good point because when it comes to rebalancing a portfolio, there is such a thing as playing with the soap too much. Like people may criticize, oh, why should you care about taxes? It's a good thing you have to pay taxes. And yes, you would like to, I imagine most people would like to realize gains and be tax efficient on when they pay those gains. That being said, though, uh, how you rebalance is a thing that not necessarily everybody has or has the ability for. So, like when it comes to mutual funds and ETFs, exchange traded funds, that's conceptually people can be quite silly when it comes to that. Like, oh, one's passive, one's active, rebel, rebel, rebel. Like, no, no, no. There are passives and actives with both structures. It's like the tax consideration is one where if you have or operate an exchange traded fund, maybe you can rebalance a little bit more frequently and do so in a way that is tax efficient, or maybe you can't. Now, how often do you rebalance? Again, that's an entirely subjective thing where, say you're an idiosyncratic growth at a reasonable price or value or whatever, like your point is you're picking off of some criteria. Should you rebalance every day? Probably not. I don't necessarily think so. At the same time, I could see arguments of, well, if you thought a company was attractive and all of a sudden some disaster hits their biggest factory or their biggest facility or research plant, and that's what really drives all the monies for this company. Would you be foolish to stay in and not necessarily get out? Maybe, maybe not. So details like these are things for anyone to consider, unless again your system is such where you don't really want to do any of that. But it's just things to still consider. That being said, though, like even if you were to rebalance quarterly or annually, um, or maybe somewhere in between, or even if you have a rebalancing band or a staggered rebalance, there are counters that people would say, well, if you just coffee canned, so to speak, and you bought something that you identified was quality, never sold. Maybe that thing forever ago was a Walmart or a Costco. Uh, you probably would be all right. But the thing that I'm again very very hesitant to circle back all the way to the very beginning, why I don't want to sound like I'm giving any sort of like advice, just highlight some observations of things that I've noticed. And I think I can get rid of the screen share and present here and bigify all the normal things so I can see chat nice and clearly. Would be that yeah, the thing that I've noticed is that it's there there is no uniform right answer necessarily. There are things that people should consider from a trade-off perspective because as I don't know if you're being facetious or being serious, diamond hands only. Maybe in some scenarios you can get away with that and do great. And it also depends on the person themselves. Like, are you comfortable, regardless of your setup and your ideal plan of concentration? What happens if one specific fund or one specific stock or whatever becomes such a massive percentage of your account? Are you comfortable with that? And then it doubles back to like, all right, what are your risk preferences and tolerances? But there's the whole entire psychological aspect to it, which I am incredibly out of my depth on. But I am aware of like things conceptually that a person's risk tolerance, they have a general risk tolerance, yes. But and I forget the word. Hopefully, live chat or you know future chat, you can like in the comment section, you can comment the word and bail me out here. But people are interesting, like in that your risk tolerance may be generally, oh, I'm risk averse. I don't like risk. I want to like minimize any sort of either downside to me or dramatic swings anyway, any direction. Um, but the counter to that though would be observations of people that usually are risk adverse, but they go to any sort of gambling establishment and they're down, but they're like, oh, I got to swing for the fences. I got to bring back my losses into either a gain or into a break even, and I walk away all happy. And so again, what that concept is, what that word is, I'm drawing a blank on. But conceptually, though, like I think many of us have seen either ourselves, if we're honest with ourselves, or at least seen that with other people, and notice that that is a very real phenomena, and that can easily happen in the world of investing, trading, speculating, what have you. Lincoln, you bring up the question of rebalancing only in losses for tax loss harvesting. You can. Plenty of people certainly do, which is in theory why some people may have claims around, you know, like December, around there, as far as like volatility or price movement of some things moving around here and there. Uh, that being said, though, like yes, like be honest with yourself, be true to yourself, or try to be the best you, but understand the game that's being played. Conceptually, what I want to get at is one of the observations is that you can have your risk tolerances, but understand the trade-offs. If you rebalance frequently, maybe that means you pay more taxes. Maybe that means you can sleep at night, but understand what that trade-off fundamentally means. If you rebalance too infrequently, understand like maybe that means you should have known when to walk away. Just as Moxie says, not wanting to take your words out of context here, because you know like I don't want anyone necessarily to talk their books here, just more conceptually about what you, the individual person, are thinking about here. I'm not here to give away answers, especially answers that don't necessarily fit, but just what works for each person is an honest question, and it's one where maybe you're a professional fund if you're a professional fund manager wasting your time here, that'd be hilarious. But like the expression though, or maybe you're an aspiring professional and you want to get into the business. The better fund managers try to look for reasons to fire clients, so to speak. And that would be because like the expression is your risk tolerance or tolerance for volatility is only as high as your most risk adverse person. Otherwise, they pull money out of the fund, and what good can you do then? Um, so yeah. Oh, yes, yes, yes. Diamond Hand, passive fund. Again, the literature has been out there for quite some time. In theory, it should do all right, being a properly diversified index with minimal counterparty risk. There should be all right. But and again, not to talk my book, but I am majority indexed. That being said, though, there are things for everyone to consider. So things to just get back was with words or with concepts. Not all of us, like we as human beings, have a bad tendency to talk past each other. When I say risk tolerance or risk aversion, maybe I'm botching the psychological aspects of that, but I like to hopefully think that like we as everyday people were aware of what that means. But in the finance world, whenever you take a look at the word risk, especially from like a fund manager perspective or a stonk picker perspective, oftentimes risk is just expressed as volatility. And what do they mean by volatility? Oftentimes we're talking standard deviation. If you refer back to statistics, you have like a bell curve, a bell curve of some sort of normal distribution. Maybe that curve is skinnier, maybe it's wider. And some people would say, oh, risk tolerance would mean we want a narrower outcome, narrower, like lot less, wide wide moving ranges in price movement within a short amount of time. So that right there is the perfect definition for risk. Would be that volatility, that standard deviation. We want to keep that. We want to minimize it, or for other people, we want to expand it and get paid for taking on risk. And like maybe you, the average viewer or average person, thinks to yourself, that's silly. Maybe that doesn't necessarily incorporate what is factual. In which case, like there are other things, instead of just your standard volatility metrics. You could use instead, because a lot of people in the finance world will quote a Sharp ratio, where standard deviation right there fundamentally in the equation for the Sharp ratio, SHARPE, I want to say, with that ratio. You could use a Sortino ratio, assuming I pronounced that properly. That being said, though, to counter that one, though, does the Sortino have the academic robustness or the rigor of having had as many people scrutinize it compared to, say, the Sharp ratio? Almost certainly not. So again, we can use metrics and our own ratios all we want. It's just like, just be aware of how robust is this. Can we use out of sample data? How do we do that? Uh, not to necessarily go full quant here, because I am not a quant. I just am fascinated by the quant world, and I'm an outsider looking in. Me referencing Pirates of Finance shows my hand of enjoying different topics and different people. Just things to be aware of. Anyways, Hydra DM. I know that 1 month. Yeah, yes, yes. It applies everywhere. And the hilarious thing, though, is that if we look at any sort of like pick your S&P 500 index fund, the topic of rebalance is a very interesting one. So we can't ever really necessarily escape rebalance, even as a passive investor or majority indexed passive investor. Um, so uh, yes, yes, Moxie, this is very true. Da, 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 da. Yes, good question. I think I hopefully covered that while I was rambling. I apologize that, Sharp is ultimately what I was talking about. But yes, if you're idiosyncratic anything, so you're by layman's terms, stock picker, a whole bunch of risks there to consider as well. Maybe factors are correct, or sector picking is the way to go. Maybe it is also geopolitical, or any sort of other numerous considerations. So great observation there as far as pointing that out, and how that it maybe isn't properly counted for in any sort of ratio. And you can only be academic to a certain point in some cases, and at some point it may be science or math and meets art, and you have craft, maybe, not to be poetic or overly stupid, but uh well, that, good sir, would be one where you would also want to rigorously test with out of sample data, I imagine. I imagine it can be done, but I am not great at prompt writing with AI. I just bang rocks together with so many things and try and get through. Uh, but yes, yes, yes. And yes, I noticed, Moxie, you mentioned in your last video yourself, Moxie Wits, YouTube channel, that you like the peg ratio. Yeah, everybody has their ratios, and that there's nothing necessarily wrong with that. Just being aware of how things, like, try. And I'm not saying to you, Moxie specifically, or any single person, the royal you, the general you. Try to consider what trade-offs you're doing with whatever it is you're doing, and are you okay with it? Are you comfortable with it? Because in the context of portfolio management, of you know when to rebalance a portfolio, if you choose to rebalance a portfolio, and how. It's one that ultimately, at the end of the day, you got to be comfortable with, and you gotta be gracious in the upswings and uh, have the appropriate responses with when things go against you. Uh, and I can see that the sophomoric humor is here, alive and well. Uh, but yes, yes, rebounds timing luck though. I think it was a very fascinating observation that the, as Mr. Hofstein calls it, as Corey Hofstein called it, the immaculate rebalance that, effectively what should be a passive strategy with just a simple tilt could produce such a massive swing. Granted, yes, we are talking the biggest swing of, or one of the more recent biggest swings of the stonk market. We'll see if we end up like having to revisit the recording in the near future. uh, that being said, I have no strong you know ob- observations on what's happening in the middle of this earnings season and whether or not yield curve and uninverts what happens. Da 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 da. I just know that I have a poll to close, so let me do that and poll. And we are at, ooh, a nice 50-50 with 10 votes. That's 10 votes. I am surprised. I am honestly honored and happy that we got 10 votes for this random live, because like I fully admit when it comes to the original spirit of this channel specifically, it is supposed to be very much about, broadly speaking, for now at least, fundamentals, dive into a 10K, components of a 10K, what to look for, interesting observations around that world. That being said, though, like I know that Andrew and I have talked behind the scenes, so a little peek behind the curtain of future things to come. Andrew is interested in talking about modeling, and maybe we can get our grubby hands on that as myself as a co-host, and hopefully for you, the viewer. There are plenty of other things that are not purely speaking from like just an accountant's perspective, or like it maybe leans a little bit more finance. Um, and that being said, like the components of a 10K, it's not just finance or accounting. Like lawyers have their foot feedback; they have their say in what goes into a 10K, for better or for worse. And I don't want to necessarily needlessly attack lawyers, because some of them raise legitimate points that are incredible value add. Like, what is the ownership of the thing you think you're investing? Or do you actually own what you think you're owning? Topics like that, which I'm sure we will cover in the future. So, anyways, yeah, I hope that covers what I really wanted to get at, because there's a lot of observations over just what should be a simple and somewhat silly topic. I know better people have covered this topic, and I hope you enjoyed it, found it interesting enough to uh, give other people that I think are really good at least a look around. I'm not saying it's necessarily going to be fruitful or the best use of your time, but things to consider. Like if you're gonna do this, just ask yourself who you are, and the world around you. It's a world where things change, things happen, and some things also can and do stick around. Sometimes things mean revert, sometimes they don't. Sometimes they cluster, stay up, stay down for quite some time. Um, and are you okay with those outcomes? That being said, hopefully Andrew should be back next week. I am fingers crossed thinking about doing things with StreamYard on the back end to make sure that you, the viewing public, are able to get the notifications up. And yeah, yeah. That being said, I hope you all enjoyed this one, and think we can call this a stream. And hope the value add continues going on. Uh, so yeah, have a good one, y'all.